Greetings, this is I, Tantus Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue talking about various animes, reviewing them, and letting you know how to use them in your BESM games, giving you little bits of suggestions and hints that if you want to use one of these worlds as the basis for a BESM game, you can. We're continuing with two more from this season, Flip Flappers and Kaiju Girls, and getting a couple more from last year, Gangsta and Working. Working being a series that has had multiple seasons, multiple spin-offs, and such. But I'll talk about each of those individually. Let's start from the ones from this season with Flip Flappers. Now, Flip Flappers centers around this girl, Kokona, and she's kind of like laid-back middle school student who really just wants to have a normal life. She runs into Paprika. Paprika is this very eccentric girl, and the two of them, together, they can go into this alternate sort of dimensions called pure illusion. Between the two of them, when they go there, they begin to look for these things called fragments, which effectively grant wishes. They start to do this for this organization called Flip Flappers. And in order to sort of protect the world, they along the way do get some kind of magical girl kind of transformation and eventually encounter a rival organization which is trying to collect the fragments in order to grant a wish of world domination for them. Now, I would call this for genres, it's of course a magical girl. They gain a transformation fairly early on in the series. They sort of show some hints of it very early on in the early episodes, but eventually they do gain a transformation and use it to effectively try to protect the fragments and do things like that. It is a science fiction. It's all about this kind of mixture of that kind of magic of the pure illusion and the technology that the Flip Flappers organization seems to have in order to monitor it and to properly use these fragments in a positive way when it comes to affecting the world. I would also call it an alternate dimension one because it shows these various strange and unusual layered dimensions. It is all about them traveling to these places. Without getting into spoilers about what it really means for the pure illusion, just think about it that they've traveled to all these very strange and unusual sort of places, the two of them together. Now, I would rate this one a 4. It has been one of the ones I like this season a lot. I just haven't put as much time and energy into it as I probably should to maybe push it up to a 5. But it is a very good one and I would recommend it. Now let's talk about using it in your BESM game. I recommend 200 points for your characters. You're going to make them a team of characters from Flip Flappers that are working together to enter into pure illusion and of course retrieve the fragments. They of course will gain some kind of transformation along the way and learn to use the abilities that they gain in pure illusion. They'll have to deal with the rival organization, Acephalus, who is trying to gain control of these things to take over the world for their own goals, and have to compete with them and the dangers of the various realms they enter into pure illusion, while unlocking more of their own abilities, dealing with some of their own real life, and perhaps rivalries between various characters and interconnections between perhaps someone from Acephalus is someone that you would know, that you would go against. Classmate, friend, family member, things like that, that make it a little bit more of a personal connection. Now let's talk about Kaiju Girls. Now this one is taking place after years after this kind of conflict between monsters and humans has resolved. Monsters/aliens. And it's kind of set around these monsters from the Ultraman universe. It's taking place in this world where monster souls or spirits have been reborn in various girls that are around there. This organization called Girls is going around collecting them up, teaching them how to use their powers for effectively good or the good betterment of society. You know, not to lose control, not to do damaging things, perhaps to help out people, various kinds of jobs that they might want to have once they're trained. We focus around 3 girls, which are the new recruits, learning to use their powers and learning them to use them for the betterment of society, how to work with learning and meeting other of their seniors that are out there, and of course learning what they want to do with their powers once they sort of have graduated their program of learning. Now I would call this series a comedy series. It's really kind of silly, based around a kind of silly ideals. I'd also call it a little bit of monster. They hint at these monsters from the Ultraman series, these giant things that they had, the big guys in rubber suits, oftentimes are more the classic ones. I kind of call it a little bit of a magical girl, though, because they have, like, transformations into their monster forms that is very reminiscent of magical girls, even though they're supposed to be monster girls. A kind of interesting mix between the two of them. Now, I rate this one a 4 just because I like a lot of the comedy that's in it. It has a really silly premise and a very strange kind of idea for these characters, but the comedy kind of hits home for me very often, so that's why I rate it higher than perhaps a lot of people would normally. Now, I would recommend when using it's in your BESM game, 300 points. Your characters will be new recruits into the girls' organization. They're just learning to use their transformations. They're learning how to use them to kind of help out people, perhaps to deal with rogue Kaiju Girls, things of that nature, get along with some of their other seniors, learning from them, learning the various roles they could take in society, from the monster fights to just being a generalized ones that go around and help out people dealing with kind of natural disasters and accidents and things like that, learning what they want to do as taking their place in the world. Now let's move on to the two series I want to talk about from last year. First up is Gangsta. Gangsta takes place where we focus on these handymen, Warwick and Nicholas. The two of them are basically hired on by various mafia groups or even the police when there's some kind of problem that they can't handle. They go in and take care of it in their own way, which oftentimes involves killing or violence. They themselves then are in this city that has a lot of mafia, of course, thugs, corrupt police officer, and prostitutes in this very crime-rich city where their job is actually quite useful. Now, for the genres, this one I call it definitely an action. They get into fights with various groups in order to resolve the problems. It's also a crime drama. It has this idea that they have very horrible things that's happened to them in their past, revolving around this almost kind of criminal activities that they themselves have gotten into, and even in now, where they sort of are doing things for the right reason, question mark. It's still kind of got these dramatic hints of the bad stuff that's happened to them. I'd also call it a little bit of like a superhuman anime, because there is this drug which gives powers called Twilight that one of the main characters, Nicholas, is affected by, and that he can use in order to gain more abilities, and other people can use them too. So it does have this level of superhuman abilities that does exist within it. I rate this one only a 3. It was pretty entertaining, but I didn't dive into it as fully as some of the others from that season. So I would recommend, if you're using this in your BESM game, 300 points. You're going to make your characters, of course, this group of handymen or handy people which go around the city and take care of various jobs for mafias, groups that could pay, corrupt police officers / police officers, anything that there's a job that someone thinks is kind of too dirty or too hard to do, your group of handy people will be hired on in order to take care of it. Of course, in the meantime, they're going to deal with their own dark pasts and echoes from it in the various things they do, and maybe trying to keep on to a shred of their humanity that they have, attempting just to maintain that just to a small degree. Now let's talk about working. Now, this is a little complex one. There have been 3 series of anime in working. There is currently one coming out, which is technically not a spin-off. Technically, the current series of working that is out is actually a version of the original series that the working series that I'm talking about more now is a spin-off of. So it had an original series, something span off of it, which became the anime series that we know, and now the original, which it span off from, is getting its own anime series. Yeah, that's a little confusing. An odd direction that they took for it. But this focuses around a cast of characters that work at the Wagnaria family restaurant. Each one is very unique and eccentric in their own sort of ways, and has their own little idiosyncrasies in the way that they work together as a group going on in this restaurant. Of course, we focus on Sota Takanashi. He's sort of our main character as the new person in Wagnaria restaurant. He comes from this family that he is the only male in a group of women, in a group of sisters. So he has this kind of weird outlooks and idiosyncrasies of himself, which are very weird at first when coming into the group, and oftentimes lead to comedic situations. But it sort of then settles in that he works just as fine with the rest of them in their own really weird comical ways of doing things. So of course, for the genres, it's a comedy. There's a lot of funny and weird things going on. The characters are so eccentric and strange. It's very entertaining. It's slice of life. It shows they're just living and working at this restaurant. Perhaps it shows a little bit of each of them at home, more about, of course, Soda. It shows more of him at home, more than anything, but does show little hints of just their normal lives and what's going on in them. I also call it a romance. There's these romantic relations which develop between various characters over the course of the series that you can see connecting up, and some of them make more headway than others, and they don't really get to that degree of like full-blown romance ever, but still it's entertaining and has this little romantic connotation. Now, I do also rate this one a 4. I'm really entertained by the working series. At least I've stuck with it for the first 3 seasons, and it had a lot of great comedical moments and interesting things that were going on throughout it. Now, if you're using it in a BESM game, I'd recommend 130 points. You're going to make all your people, of course, workers at a Wagnaria restaurant. They're going to have a cast of NPCs, which will fill in the blanks of those that work at the job, and each of them, including your players, are going to be very unique in the way that they do things. They're all, of course, going to have each of their own jobs, and it will be the sort of whatever situation's going on related to one of their own quirks or something, dealing with the normal day-to-day operations, which will kind of add into the comedic elements, and you'll sort of focus around the various characters doing various things. You might, of course, focus a little bit on out-of-work life, what's going on for various characters at various times, if it would add to the situations, because you're really looking for that more romantic comedy with separating them out, so it's a little bit of comedy, a little bit of romance here and there that you're really focusing on in this sort of normal life that the characters are going through. So that's it for today. I introduced you to 4 more anime series and talked about how you could use them in your BESM game while giving a little bit of review on them to see if you'd want to watch them yourselves. Next week, of course, 4 more to go over. Plenty of more anime out there to talk about. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. Show support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.